is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. An act of absolute cowardice. France's President Emmanuel Macron condemns a knife attack on a group of 2-year-old children. 2 are in a critical condition. An urgent plea for international aid. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Kherson to see the flood damage after the destruction of the Nova Kakhovka Dam. Russia says it's continuing rescue operations in affected regions, once again blaming Kyiv for what happened. And tens of millions told to wear face masks as parts of North America are blanketed in a haze of smoke due to Canadian wildfires. 3 people, including 2 young children, are fighting for their lives after a knife attack in France. A total of 6 people were injured, most of whom are children of around 2 years old. They were stabbed at a playground in the town of Annecy in the French Alps. Police have arrested the alleged attacker, who they described as a Syrian national with legal refugee status in Sweden. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Ross Cullen in Paris. So, Ross, what do we know about what's happened?
Yeah, good afternoon, Robin. The Prime Minister, Elizabeth Borne, has now arrived at the scene of the attack in Annecy in southeastern France, on one of France's most famous lakes, just at the foothills of the French Alps. She has described what happened in Annecy as odious and unspeakable. She was accompanied down to Annecy by the Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, for meetings with officials. And also, we do know that they have released more information about the children who are in hospital. So 6 people, 4 of whom were children, were injured in this attack. 3 people are in hospital in intensive care. 1 is an adult. The 2 children who are in intensive care are aged just 3 and 2. And we also know that 2 of the other children listed as a British national and the other a German national.
So, Ross, what do we know about the alleged attacker?
Yeah, reported to be 31-year-old Syrian national with refugee status in Sweden. We are waiting for more confirmation on the authorities about the identity of the man that they have arrested. The attack was over in just 4 minutes, the authorities saying, when they apprehended the suspect. There's a video circulating on social media, unverified video, but it does show a man being tried to be stopped by members of the public with rucksacks. The man is holding a knife. He then goes into the children's playground, threatens women who have infants in strollers. There's some chaos in the playground before the man calmly walks out of the playground with the knife still in his hand. It happened so quickly. There were people jogging in the background, other people cycling, perhaps on their way to work or taking their children to school. That video is the one that's been circulating online, but we have had confirmation, at least at the presidential level, of the attack having happened. We know that Emmanuel Macron has described it as an act of absolute cowardice. The Justice Minister, Eric Dupond-Moretti, describing it as an act of absolute horror. And there was 1 minute's silence held here in Paris in the National Assembly by MPs to mark the attack and in memory of the victims.
Ross, thank you very much. That's our correspondent, Ross Cullen in Paris. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited the flood-hit region of Kherson to see the emergency response effort after Tuesday's breach of the Nova Kakhovka Dam. Thousands of people are still being evacuated to safer areas as dozens of communities have been left inundated by the floodwaters. Both Moscow and Kyiv have blamed each other for the destruction of the dam. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez reports.
Rescue workers raced to evacuate people from flooded villages near the Dnipro River. The destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric dam sent thousands of cubic feet of water gushing downstream, threatening 80 settlements and thousands of residents on the river's Ukrainian-held and Russian-held sites. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky toured the disaster area in Kherson and pleaded for help from the international community.
Зараз потрібна чітка Now, a clear and prompt response from the world is needed to what is happening. It's even impossible to accurately determine how many people in the temporary occupied territory of the Kherson region may die without rescue, without drinking water, without food, without medical assistance. Our military and special services, to the extent possible, despite the shelling, are saving people.
Thousands of residents are without food and drinking water. According to Ukrainian authorities, water levels peaked at just over 3 meters in the city of Kherson and are expected to recede in the coming days. Thousands of people have been evacuated while the fighting continues. Russian emergency services launched their own rescue missions. Ukraine has blamed Russia for the breach of the dam, while Russia stated that Ukrainian forces carried out the attack. The dam lies on the conflict's front line, leaving residents caught in the middle.
We need to evacuate Granny. She's on the first floor, sitting there with her cats and dogs. We brought her from another district yesterday as we hoped it would be safer here, but we need to evacuate her again today.
Ukraine's authorities say the dam breach could be the country's worst ecological disaster in recent history, as floodwaters engulf towns, petrol stations and farms where pesticides and other chemicals are used. The extent of the environmental damage might not be known for weeks. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent in Moscow, Stuart Smith. So, Stuart, it's still not clear who's responsible for this dam explosion, but Moscow, though, making its case at the UN's top court.
Yeah, making its case at a trial which ostensibly is related to the financing of terrorism and also racial discrimination. But the Russian representatives there at the ICJ, the International Criminal Court of Justice in the Netherlands, linking that to the activities of the past few days, alleging that Ukraine was responsible and had planned for this. Here's what one of those representatives said earlier.
C'est l'Ukraine qui l'a fait.
Actually, Ukraine did it. The Kiev regime not only launched massive artillery attacks against the dam on the night of June 6th, but it also deliberately raised the water level of the Kakhovka reservoir to a critical level by opening the gates of the Dniprovsky hydroelectric power station.
Now, the latest we heard from that in terms of the impact of this flooding is that 5 people have died. That's the first time we've had a number for the number of people that have been killed by this. They were part of a group of 7 shepherds grazing sheep on one of the islands in the middle of the Dnipro River. The other 2 are still awaiting rescue from there. There are around 40 people in hospital, according to the Russian authorities installed in the Kherson region on the left bank of the Dnipro River. There are still multiple towns completely underwater, though in some areas, like Nova Kakhovka, one of the worst hit towns, which experienced 12 meters of flooding, the water level is finally starting to go down.
And Stuart, blame being traded over an explosion at a fertiliser pipeline. What's the Kremlin saying about that?
Yeah, this fertilizer pipeline has been part of discussions related to the grain deal, the Black Sea grain deal, interestingly, because Russia says it's one of the things that should be operational as part of the deal, which was meant to allow Russia better access to ports for exporting its fertilizer as well as its agricultural products. It's the world's longest ammonia pipeline, 2,500 kilometers long, but it goes through Ukrainian territory. Russia's been pushing for this to be opened again, which has been closed since the start of the so-called special military operation last year, but now it's been blown up on Ukrainian territory, and the Russian Ministry of Defense says it's a Ukrainian saboteur group which is responsible, a group intent upon sabotaging the future of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. In terms of the damage of it, there seems to be none, although some civilians were harmed, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, when the explosion happened. Russia says its part of the pipeline on Russian territory is still intact, but it could take 1 to 3 months to repair the damage on the Ukrainian side. With that now damaged and taken out of the equation for the Black Sea grain deal, Russia has expressed even less confidence that it's going to be renewed. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin press secretary, saying that this was something which would severely complicate any future discussions about the grain deal working again.
Stuart Smith in Moscow, thank you very much. The European Commission says it's suing Poland over a law which critics say could be used to stifle opposition parties and ban them from taking office. The bill allows investigators to probe alleged Russian influence in Polish politics. Well, our correspondent Alex Cadier is in Brussels. So, Alex, what's the European Commission worried about?
Well, as you said, the European Commission's position is that this law, this new committee that's being set up, or the Polish government is trying to set up, would be undemocratic. The a special body created by that Polish government to investigate Russian influence in Polish politics might do a little bit more than that. And there's a fear that this law will be used to target opposition politicians and that the ruling PIS party will use it to keep itself in power. That's the concern. The European Commission saying the law violates the principles of legality and non-retroactivity. Vera Jourova, who's the Transparency Commissioner of the European Commission, that building behind me, saying that there was a sense of urgency because we believe this law is a really serious blow to the democratic processes and the fairness of elections. And again, one of the key figures in opposition in Poland is Donald Tusk, former Prime Minister of Poland and also former President of the European Council here in Brussels, a very well-known figure in Brussels and in the European Union circles. And there's a fear that he will be targeted by this new committee, by this new investigative body for connections with Russia, or at least alleged connections with Russia. And the leader of the PIS party has already said that Donald Tusk is, quote, being too friendly to Moscow. So this is the kind of stuff that the European Commission is very concerned about. This legal challenge, known as an infringement procedure, gives Warsaw 21 days to respond, and if that response is deemed insufficient, the EU can escalate this, leading to a potential court case, and then further down the line, financial penalties. So at least a few weeks before we hear any more on this court case by the European Union.
But within Poland itself, there's actually a division over this, isn't there?
Yeah, there's huge opposition, not necessarily specifically just about this, but again, quite a lot of anti-government opposition as well. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets of Warsaw and other towns and cities across Poland just in the last few days in protest against what they see as undemocratic or increasingly autocratic measures being rolled out by the Polish government. So there's been really big protests. The mayor of Warsaw, who is also a member of the Civic Platform, which is Donald Tusk's opposition coalition, saying very clearly that the commission, or the proposal by the Polish government to investigate Russian influence, would set up a Bolshevik tribunal, saying there's no wonder the EU is taking action. The Polish government, meanwhile, downplaying this legal action, calling it absurd, baseless attack on Polish politics, and saying that the EU is interfering with Poland's internal affairs. So quite a bit of tension. It's also following various legal battles between the EU and Poland over policies by the PIS party, the ruling governing party, PIS party, including reforms of the country's legal system that have got the EU rather concerned and actually made the EU withhold billions of euros in funding for Poland from European Commission money. So certainly a bit of tension there between Poland and the EU. That's not to say they're not aligned in the bigger picture. The EU and Poland very much aligned in their support of Ukraine, very much aligned in their opposition to Russia, to the Kremlin, and they're concerned with Russian interference both in European politics and in European life in general, just not necessarily aligned on the best way to deal with it.
Alex, thank you very much. Our correspondent Alex Cadier in Brussels. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Fruit from the East. China's lychee captivating European consumers.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
This week on Razor, man-made photosynthesis, and how a common spring flower is being used in the fight against Alzheimer's disease.
So glanthlamine is a naturally occurring alkaloid that the daffodils produce. It causes an enzyme imbalance in the brain, which is the opposite of the Alzheimer's enzyme imbalance in the brain.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. An act of absolute cowardice. France's President Emmanuel Macron condemns a knife attack on a group of 2-year-old children. 2 are in a critical condition. And an urgent plea for international aid. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Kherson to see the flood damage after the destruction of the Nova Kakhovka Dam. Millions of people across North America have been advised to wear face masks due to the poor air quality caused by hundreds of wildfires in Canada. Smoke blanketed New York's skyline and is expected to spread to parts of the East Coast in the United States. The fires are being blamed on a particularly warm and dry spring. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrace in New York. So, John, it was really bad on Wednesday.
You know, it really was. After I did the London programs yesterday, about 2 hours after that, the skyline of New York City simply disappeared. It just went. It was absolutely extraordinary, and it was very, very eerie. At about 2 p.m. local time, we had what you might call an orange out. You know, when it snows very badly, they talk about a white out. Well, this was literally an orange out. It was extraordinary. And if you Google later, when you're free, the movie Blade Runner 2049, that movie is set around just a similar circumstance to what we experienced yesterday. And the problem is we can't take pictures of it on our cell phones, because the cell phones tend to have an automatic white balance built into them, which, unless you know how to turn it off, and I can't, it makes the pictures look better than they really are. I mean, it was absolutely remarkable to see what happened here in New York yesterday. Now, I want to be absolutely clear and level with our audience around the world. We know that many of you suffer from this on a regular basis, particularly in Africa, parts of Asia, the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa. We understand that, but it's very unusual to have sandstorm-like conditions in the middle of a city like New York, and we had that yesterday. Now, there's a health emergency here until midnight tonight, local time. It's about 09 GMT on Friday, and at the moment, the pollution level, it went up almost to 500 during this period I'm talking about yesterday. It's now at 209, which is very, very unhealthy. And now we come to the anecdotes. People say that being out in this for 1 hour is like smoking a cigarette. I have no way of proving whether that's true, but that's basically what people are saying here. And even things like Broadway had to be cancelled yesterday. To be or not to be, of course, is the most famous quote from Hamlet. Well, it wasn't to be. They're doing the show in Central Park for the tourists this summer. They're in preview at the moment. They had to cancel last night, and they won't be back until Saturday. And I think that's very understandable, because it must be very difficult to act in this if you're standing in the middle of Central Park, which they are. However, other Broadway shows like the famous Hamilton and Camelot had to be cancelled, and also the well-known English actress Jodie Comer, who's from Liverpool, who's doing very well on Broadway at the moment in a play called Prima Facie, which is a one-woman legal drama. She had to come off the stage halfway through because she said she couldn't breathe and an understudy took over. Major League Baseball was postponed in Philadelphia and New York last night. Flights even now are being slowed out of New York, Philly, Washington, D.C. and Charlotte. And that pungent smell in the air still is here, that burning, sweet burning smell, because remember, these are maple trees up in Quebec in Canada that are burning, and the smell and the smoke is being blown here. Robin?
Well, John, while you've been talking to us, we've been looking at pictures from around the United States of that orange haze, as you described, particularly notable in what looked to me like a Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. What does the city of New York say about this?
Yes. You know, it's interesting, that orange haze. It didn't last very long, about 30 minutes, but when it was lasting, boy, oh boy, that was a weird, weird experience. It really was. The City of New York, of course, is very concerned. The main message from the mayor, Eric Adams, is, look, stay indoors. If you don't have to go outside, don't go outside. Certainly don't exercise outside. If you can keep the air conditioning on, provided it's not sucking the bad air into your apartment, then keep that on. wear a mask at all times. It's really funny, you know, Robin, because everybody in New York wanted to give up those masks after COVID, and basically we did. And now everyone's wearing a mask again. The city says we've got 1 million N95s on hand if you want one. And most people are either wearing some kind of official mask or some kind of face covering, including our cameraman Frank at the moment is wearing a mask because it's, you know, it's quite bad out here. You can't really tell from the TV picture, but it is. Elderly, kids, most vulnerable, got to watch out for them. And the forecast is for it to ease a little bit today, Thursday, and then I think it could be quite bad on Friday and Saturday. But then the winds change, and it will be all over for us in New York anyway, in New York by Sunday. And it will have been quite an experience, I think. But, you know, having said all of that, Robin, you know, life goes on, doesn't it? Life goes on.
John, you're such a trooper. Thank you very much for that. That's our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. El Niño has officially returned and is likely to yield extreme weather later this year, the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has warned. After 3 years of La Niña climate pattern, which often lowers global temperatures slightly, the hotter El Niño is back following months of gradually warming sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific Ocean. The last time an El Niño was in place in 2016, the world saw its hottest year on record. Coupled with warming from climate change, 2023 or 2024 could reach new highs. The UN Secretary-General has called for greater action to protect our oceans on World Oceans Day. Antonio Guterres said climate change was disrupting ocean currents and damaging fragile ecosystems. He said marine life was also being threatened by overfishing, plastics and other pollution. An illegal weapons amnesty in Serbia has been extended to the end of June. It was issued a month ago after 2 deadly mass shootings and had been due to expire on Thursday. Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
At an undisclosed location near the town of Smederevo, Serbian police gathered all the illegal weapons that had been voluntarily handed over in the past month. An amazing cache, including a wide variety of deadly firearms, from machine guns, World War II relics, to rare collector pieces like this Luger with a picture of Lenin on one and Tito on the other side of the hand grip. Even a remote guidance controller unit of an anti-tank missile is here.
All these weapons, ammunition and explosive devices were illegally owned by Serbian citizens. A part of almost 70,000 pieces is here, but the authorities are saying that these are just the tip of the iceberg.
Officials say there are around 750,000 legal weapons in Serbia, but most of those are illegally owned by sports clubs, shooting ranges and private security companies. The number of illegal weapons is hard to know. For several weeks, people in Belgrade have protested against gun violence that left 18 dead in 2 separate mass shootings in May. They demand a safer environment, but also political changes in the country. As a response, the government vows to implement strict measures against those who have not surrendered their illegal weapons.
We won't show any remorse and implement legal sanctions for all those who own or are found with the illegal weapons during any actions of the Ministry of Interior Affairs. The prescribed punishments for those would range from 8 to 15 years in prison.
The gun culture is deeply rooted in Serbian tradition, as we were told at one of Belgrade's famous shooting ranges. But they support the government's crackdown on illegal gun owners.
To own a gun just for the sake of owning it, or because of our tradition and culture, is wrong. Particularly mines, explosives and automatic weapons. It is absolutely wrong to own any of that.
They say that those who legally own guns are rarely the source of gun violence. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, near the town of Smederevo in Serbia.
A new survey suggests that over 60% of Europeans want to remain neutral on the issue of Taiwan. The poll of over 16,000 people in 11 European nations found that 46% viewed China as a necessary partner. 62% said their countries should not take sides in any conflict between the United States and China over Taiwan. That's broadly in line with recent comments from French President Emmanuel Macron when he warned of getting caught up in crises that are not ours. Chinese fruit, the lychee, is becoming more popular outside of Asia. In France, as well as being good to eat, the lychee is also fast becoming a staple in the hair and beauty industries. Our correspondent Natalie Malchas reports.
Fresh lychees are exported from China to 21 countries around the world. In newer markets in Europe, like France, Chinese lychee growers are on a campaign to woo new palates.
I think not too popular, but I knew it before. So in the Chinese restaurants, you get it for dessert or as a juice. And I know it from markets. I enjoy to peel it, and the color, the sweetness, and the juiciness.
French consumers seem enchanted by the Chinese import, and it's more than just its charming red color and bite-sized freshness. It's considered a superfruit because it's rich in vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and other beneficial plant compounds.
On Mauritius and Réunion Island next door, we also have lychees, so I know them. Because it's a tropical region, the lychees are sweeter.
Cherries, raspberries and strawberries are already part of the French summer diet, and soon Chinese lychee growers hope the king of China's exotic fruits will join this list. It's already found a place in the French beauty market. Extracts of the modest little lychee are commonly used in perfume, skincare and hair products. The main lychee season runs from April to July. According to industry trade mapping, China's lychee export market was worth about $64 million in 2021. Annually, China exports over 21,000 tons of fresh lychees. As demand grows in France, close to 3,000 shipments of the fruit stock local shelves every year.
Lots of foreigners know lychees, know Chinese fruits. Yeah. And they want to try new things, they want to try new fruits, want to try the special foods from all corners of the world.
As consumers also become more health conscious, the specialty fruit is slowly gaining popularity in Europe. The industry says while the average consumption remains low, they're hoping to change that soon. Natalie Malchas, CGTN, Paris.
The headlines again. An act of absolute cowardice. France's President Emmanuel Macron condemns the knife attack on a group of young children. 2 are in a critical condition. An urgent plea for international aid. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Kherson to see the flood damage after the destruction of the Novokakhovka Dam. And tens of millions of people told to wear face masks as parts of North America are blanketed in a haze of smoke due to Canadian wildfires. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team here in London, it's goodbye.